Imagine leaving your home for just a year. A year you thought would be temporary. You pack up your life, say goodbye to your neighbors, and tell yourself everything will be the same when you get back. But when you return, nothing is the same, not a single thing. And then it hits you. Your land, your property, it's not yours anymore. Strange mansions, manicured lawns, luxury cars, and people living there who have no idea you owned this place. That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, what I did next, well, they'll never forget it. I hadn't intended to be away that long. Life just happened. Work, travel, emergencies, things that pulled me across the country and kept me from coming home. My little house, my land. It was supposed to wait for me. My neighbor promised he'd keep an eye on it. My friends said everything would be fine. And I, of course, believed them. When I left, it was a quiet neighborhood. Small houses, kids playing outside, people waving hello. But that was a year ago. The moment I drove back, my heart sank. There were huge gates where the small wooden fence used to be. Luxury cars parked along the street like they were on a movie set. Mansions, yes, mansions, built on my land. My eyes couldn't believe it. My mind couldn't process it. How could this happen? I stopped my car and just stared. I remember saying out loud, almost in disbelief, This is my land. How is this possible? Then a man came out from one of the houses, well-dressed, confident. I could tell he was used to people looking at him with respect, or maybe fear. He noticed me staring and smiled. Not the friendly smile, the kind that made me feel unwelcome. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. I own this land. All of this land. I've been gone for a year, but this isn't yours to build on." He laughed. Not a short laugh, a slow, smug one. "Oh, you mean before the HOA? You see, the neighborhood association, they handle the property here now. You've been gone too long. Things change." I felt a hot wave of anger. Too long? A year? That's all it takes to steal someone's home. He shrugged. Not steal. We upgraded. I wanted to scream, but I took a deep breath. I knew getting angry wasn't going to help. I needed a plan. I spent the next hour walking the property. Every step I took felt surreal. My old garden? Replaced by a massive swimming pool. My little porch? Gone. Replaced by a grand marble entrance. My house. Actually, there were 3 houses on what used to be my one property. Then the thought hit me. If they could build on my land without permission, there had to be a way to fight back. I just needed the right approach. The HOA, or Homeowners Association, was notorious in that neighborhood. People whispered about them, about how powerful they were, how they could intimidate anyone who opposed them. But I wasn't about to leave. Not after seeing my land turned into someone else's playground. I went home to think. I sat at my kitchen table, stared at the photos of my old house before I left, and tried to calm my racing mind. That's when I started to remember the law books I had tucked away during college. The notes about property rights, tenant laws, and HOA regulations. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, they hadn't covered every loophole. That night I began researching every detail I could find about my land. The HOA, the construction permits, the building codes, they all became my obsession. I needed evidence. I needed proof that these mansions were built illegally on my land. And as I dug deeper, my frustration turned into determination. By the end of the week, I had a folder stacked with documents, photos, and property deeds. I even started keeping a diary of every interaction with the HOA and their residents. It was emotional. Every entry was a mix of anger, disbelief, and slowly, a growing sense of control. I realized that while they might have thought they could just take over, I had something more powerful, the truth. And then it happened. The first confrontation. I walked up to the same man who had laughed at me before, and this time, I wasn't scared. "I have all the records," I said calmly, holding out the folder. "Every piece of land, every document proving this is mine. And legally you are trespassing." His face froze for a second. Then he tried to hide his shock with that same smug smile. But I could see it, the tiny crack in his confidence. "Are you serious?" he said. "That's impossible." "Try me," I replied. And for the first time since I came back, I felt Powerful, not angry, not scared, just ready. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the day's events. But I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. They thought they could take my land, build their mansions, live in luxury, and I'd do nothing. But I wouldn't just fight back. I had something far better in mind. A plan that would not only get my land back, but maybe even turn the tables in a way they never expected. You ever feel like the whole world is against you? Like every door you try to open just slams in your face? That's exactly how I felt when I realized the HOA wasn't just ignoring me. They were fighting back, and they weren't playing fair. But here's the thing, sometimes when people underestimate you, that's when you hit the hardest. After gathering all my evidence, I knew I had to confront the HOA in a way that left no room for excuses. I scheduled a meeting. The email I sent them? Polite, formal but firm. Subject: urgent property ownership concern. Dear HOA Board, I am the legal owner of the property located at address. Recent developments suggest construction has taken place without my permission. I request an immediate review and removal of unauthorized structures. Sending that email felt like stepping into a battlefield. I knew they'd try to intimidate me, belittle me, or just ignore me completely. And, well, I was right. The response came the next day. Short, cold, smug. Dear my name. All developments on the property were approved by the HOA and fall within legal guidelines. Any claims otherwise will need to be handled through formal legal channels. That's when I realized this was not just a simple misunderstanding. They weren't going to back down voluntarily. I had to go through the proper legal channels. I reached out to a local attorney, someone who specialized in property disputes and HOA conflicts. As I explained the situation, I noticed something. The attorney didn't blink. They didn't even flinch. I, on the other hand, was shaking slightly. But by the time I finished, the lawyer smiled. Don't worry, they said. They might have numbers, they might have intimidation tactics. But you have law on your side, and we'll make sure they learn that lesson. The process wasn't easy. Depositions, legal notices, document verification. It felt like a war of paperwork. But each step, each small victory, gave me more confidence. For instance, I discovered that some of the permits the HOA claimed they had were invalid. Some of the construction didn't even comply with local zoning laws. One evening, I went back to my property with my attorney. Walking through the land, seeing the mansions looming over what used to be my small, peaceful yard, I could feel anger boiling inside. Look at this, I said, pointing to the largest house. This entire building, it shouldn't exist. My attorney nodded. And it won't, at least not for long. We have enough evidence to challenge them. Now it's about timing and strategy. And that's when the first confrontation happened in person. I walked up to the same man, the one who had laughed at me before, with my attorney by my side. This is your final warning, my attorney said firmly. The structures on this property are unauthorized. Immediate steps need to be taken to rectify the situation, or legal action will follow. The man's face shifted from smugness to panic. He tried to cover it with a forced smile. The HOA, it's complicated, he stammered. Complicated? I asked, my voice calm but cold. This is my land. You built mansions on it. It's not complicated. It's illegal. They tried every trick, delays, fake permits, empty threats. But the legal system was on my side. Every meeting, every phone call, every email strengthened my case. And as I continued, I started noticing something unexpected. They were starting to worry. I could see it in the way they avoided eye contact, in the way the HOA board started meeting privately more often. My small steps, documenting everything, staying polite but firm, were shaking their confidence. And then came the most emotional moment of the whole chapter. A neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. She told me that while I was away, the neighborhood had been buzzing with gossip about the new homeowners. She said she felt bad because she had always respected my family's land and wanted to help. Her words hit me harder than anything else. You're not just fighting for land, she said softly. You're fighting for your family, your memories, everything you've built. And she was right. Every late night researching documents, every stressful call with lawyers, every step I took to reclaim my land, it wasn't just about property. It was about justice, respect, and reclaiming what's yours. By the end of the month, the HOA realized that ignoring me wasn't going to work. They offered to negotiate. That in itself was a victory. I finally had a seat at the table. But here's the thing about battles. Just because the enemy agrees to meet doesn't mean the fight is over. Sometimes that's when the real challenge begins. I remember sitting in the meeting room, folder in hand, heart pounding. The board members were polite, too polite. Every word they spoke was calculated. Every smile felt fake. But I had done my homework. Every law, every permit, every violation, I had it all lined up. And then I made a bold move. I laid out everything on the table, calmly but forcefully. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just showed them the undeniable truth. Their mansions were on my land. The room went silent. I could feel the shift. The power balance was tipping. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt unstoppable. Here's the thing about people who think they're untouchable. They forget one thing. Someone they've wronged can be smarter, faster, and more patient than they imagine. That's exactly what happened with me. They thought I'd panic, that I'd give up. But I had a plan that would not just reclaim my land, but make them realize messing with me was the biggest mistake of their lives. The negotiations with the HOA started politely enough, but I could feel the tension in the room. They were trying to intimidate me, to make me doubt myself. But I'd spent weeks preparing. I knew every loophole, every misstep, every illegal permit. One of the board members, a woman with sharp eyes, tried to throw me off. You do realize, of course, that challenging the HOA could cost you thousands in legal fees, she said, her tone dripping with faux sympathy. I smiled calmly. I also realize, Mom, that what you built on my property is illegal, and sometimes breaking the law costs more than money. That quiet confidence made them shift uncomfortably, and I could see it. For the first time, the board wasn't in control. After a few more tense exchanges, I decided it was time for my boldest move yet. I had collected video evidence of every illegal construction, photos showing exactly where each mansion encroached on my property, and legal documents proving ownership. But I didn't stop there. I hired a surveyor to map the property lines in exact detail, creating a visual record that even the HOA's lawyers couldn't deny. I remember the day the surveyor's report arrived. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through every page. Each map, each photograph, each line on those documents was a reminder. This was my land. And soon they would see it too. I scheduled a second meeting, this time prepared to show them everything. As I walked in, the tension was palpable. The board members tried to look confident, but I could see the subtle signs: tightened jaws, darting eyes, hands fidgeting. I laid the documents on the table one by one. Here's the proof, I said calmly. Everything you've built on my land is unauthorized. These maps show the boundaries. These permits are invalid. And this? I held up the video evidence. Shows construction that directly violates local laws. For the first time, the room went silent. No smirks, no fake smiles, just stunned faces. Then came the clever twist. I had done more than just collect evidence. I had prepared an offer. I knew they wanted to avoid public embarrassment and legal trouble. So I proposed something that shocked them. You can stay, I said, leaning forward slightly. But from now on you pay rent, fair market value, every month, because this land belongs to me. And until I decide otherwise, this is the agreement. They laughed at first, a short, nervous laugh. You're joking, right? I shook my head. Not at all. This is your chance to resolve this without going to court. If not, well, I have no problem pursuing full legal action. And trust me, that won't be as friendly. The rest of the meeting was a blur of negotiation. I stood my ground, never raising my voice, never losing composure. By the end, they agreed. Reluctantly, yes, but agreed nonetheless. They would pay rent for living on my land. I left the meeting with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Finally, justice had a face, and it was mine. That night, I walked around my property. imagining what it would look like in the future. The lawns, the houses, yes, they were still there, but the power dynamics had changed. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had reclaimed control over their life and land. A few days later, the rent checks started arriving, and with them a subtle but powerful sense of satisfaction. Not about money, although that helped, but about respect. They had underestimated me, thought a year away meant they could take everything, and they were wrong. I also reached out to my neighbors. Many had been silently rooting for me, but didn't know how to help. Sharing my victory with them wasn't just about celebration. It was about showing that fairness and patience pay off. But even with the victory, I knew one thing. I had to stay vigilant. HOAs are tricky. They test boundaries. They look for weakness. But now I was prepared, not just with documents and legal knowledge, but with confidence and strategy. I was no longer the person who had left a year ago. I was stronger, smarter, and ready for anything. And that's the beauty of this chapter. The underdog doesn't just survive, they adapt. Learn and fight back in ways that surprise everyone, including the people who thought they were untouchable. As I stood at the edge of my property, watching the sunset over the lawns and mansions, I whispered to myself, "You may have built on my land, but I just built my legacy." Have you ever worked so hard, fought so long, and felt so close to giving up? Only to realize that victory isn't just about winning. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your pride, your life. That's what this final chapter is about. How I took back everything that was mine, taught them a lesson, and found something far bigger than just property, something they could never touch. After securing the agreement that the HOA would pay rent for living on my land, I thought the battle was over, but little did I know. The real challenge was just beginning. The first week of rent payments arrived, and while it felt incredible to finally see tangible results, I also noticed something. The HOA was trying to push boundaries again. They delayed payments, argued about minor clauses, and tested my patience. But I had learned something crucial from the previous months. Patience. Persistence and documentation are my strongest weapons. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the payment schedule, my phone rang. It was the same man, the one who had laughed at me when I first returned. His voice was hesitant, almost nervous. "Look, about the rent," he started. I didn't even wait for him to finish. I calmly replied, "You know the terms. Pay on time or we escalate. I suggest you stick to the agreement." He swallowed hard. Yes, understood. That call reminded me how far I had come. From feeling powerless to now holding the leverage. Every late night, every document, every confrontation had led to this moment. But I also knew the fight wasn't just about money. It was about sending a message, about showing that you can't walk over someone who's determined to stand up. Then came the unexpected twist. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance started reaching out. One couple told me they wanted to plant a garden in the small strip of land that still belonged to me, before the HOA's encroachment. Another neighbor, an elderly man, invited me to share stories about the original community. Slowly, my land wasn't just mine. It was becoming a symbol of justice and perseverance in the neighborhood. But just when I thought I had full control, the HOA tried one last stunt. They filed a counterclaim, trying to argue that their mansions were now grandfathered in because of technicalities in permits. I stared at the court documents in disbelief. They were literally trying to rewrite history. I took a deep breath and remembered all the nights I had spent preparing for this. I had anticipated everything. With my attorney, we went over every loophole, every inconsistency, every violation. And I realized this was the moment that would define everything. The court hearing day arrived, and as I walked into the courtroom, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. I was ready, not just for the fight, but for the outcome I knew I deserved. I had stacks of documents, photographs, video evidence, and expert testimonies. Every angle was covered. The HOA lawyers tried to intimidate me again. They spoke in legal jargon, used fast-talking arguments, and even attempted to belittle me. But I stayed calm. Every time they tried to throw me off, I relied on facts, proof and my own voice. I spoke clearly, passionately, and emotionally, because this wasn't just about property, it was about respect, justice, and dignity. At one point, the judge paused and looked directly at me. "You seem very confident," the judge said. I nodded. "I am, because I have proof. I have documents, and I know my rights. And I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for fairness and integrity." The courtroom remained silent. Every head turned, every eye fixed on the evidence I presented. And then the moment of truth arrived. The judge began ruling. "We find in favor of the property owner," the judge declared. A wave of relief, joy, and triumph rushed over me. The HOA had no choice but to comply. Not only would the rent continue, but all illegal structures encroaching beyond the permitted areas were to be corrected immediately. And more importantly, they would never challenge me again without facing consequences. I remember walking out of the courtroom and feeling the sun on my face. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle, it was about reclaiming my life, my property, and my pride. People who had doubted me, neighbors who had feared the HOA, everyone who had watched quietly. They now saw that standing up matters, that persistence and courage pay off. In the weeks that followed, the changes were visible. The illegal structures were removed or corrected. The rent continued to arrive promptly, and the neighborhood started to feel like it had before, a place of respect, community, and fairness. But for me, it had changed forever. I had grown. I had learned that even when people seem unbeatable, knowledge, preparation, and courage can turn the tide. One evening I sat on what remained of my original porch, looking out over my property. I couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long, painful, emotional, but worth every second. The HOA, once a symbol of fear and intimidation, was now a lesson in humility, and I had become someone who knew their worth, their rights, and their power. I also took a moment to reflect on what this story means for everyone watching this. Life isn't always fair. People will try to take advantage, and sometimes it feels like the odds are stacked against you. But the key is simple: stand firm, prepare wisely, and never let fear dictate your actions. And here's the emotional takeaway I want everyone to feel. It's not about revenge or anger. It's about reclaiming your space, whether that's literal, emotional, or personal. It's about proving to yourself that you are stronger than any obstacle, smarter than any manipulator, and capable of turning adversity into triumph. Now, before this story ends, there's something I want everyone watching to do. If this story inspired you, motivated you, or even gave you hope that you can overcome challenges in your own life, do 3 simple things. Comment below, share your story, your thoughts, or just say hi. I want to hear from you. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any stories of real people standing up for themselves. VIP engagement. Share this with someone who needs motivation, someone who's facing their own unfair battles. Let them see that perseverance and courage always pay off. Because if there's one lesson from my year-long battle, it's this: no one can take what's yours if you fight with knowledge, patience, and heart. And sometimes the victory is even sweeter, when the people who doubted you are the ones who finally have to respect you. So to everyone watching, don't ever give up. Stand tall, prepare smart, and fight for what's right. Because the world may throw challenges at you, but it also gives you the power to rise above them. And when you do, the satisfaction, the pride, and the triumph you feel, there's nothing like it. As I sit here now, reflecting on this journey, I realize something else. This story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's felt powerless, overlooked, or doubted. It's a reminder that your courage, your strategy, and your persistence are stronger than anyone's attempt to intimidate you. And that's how I came back after a year to a neighborhood that had taken my land and turned it into a victory that no HOA could ever erase.